continuing our judicial reform panel, and today we are here to continue our joint search for new solutions to modern threats to democracy, which are lawfare and strategic corruption. And now I want to present our remarkable speakers who are joining me today. So, Olesea Stamate, advisor to the President of Republic of Moldova on judiciary and former Minister of Justice of Moldova. Good morning, Olesea. And we also have online three prominent and outstanding experts. These are Ms. Hanna Suchocka, Honorary President of the Venice Commission of Council of Europe. Good morning, Ms. Suchocka. We also have Mr. Tilman Hoppe, an expert from Germany, anti-corruption and judiciary expert. And we are also honored to welcome Ms. Laura Stefan, expert from Romania, and also former Minister of Justice from Romania. So,
good morning.
Good morning, dear experts. So, for the next hour, we will be discussing judicial reform in transitional democracies. As we, with our colleagues in Antac, we made an analytical research, and it turned out that Ukraine is not unique. We, with countries in the region, particularly Armenia, Georgia, and Moldova, we do share the same problems. Dependent and corrupt judiciaries, which are actually governed by influential group of judges referred to as clans, poor judicial ethics, mutual cover-ups, and widespread corruption. These all are factors that corrode judicial system, therefore it cannot defend our democracy. So I want to ask my first question, Ms. Stamate. So I know that Moldova is now on the edge of fighting judicial corruption. So what are your solutions to this problem?
First of all, if I may, let me thank you, the organizers of this conference, for hosting it. Not only for such a high-level participation and excellent organization, but primarily for this very interesting topic that you opened. I think that many experts, like me, and officials from the justice systems in the countries in the region have asked themselves this question in the last years. Why do we have such a corrupt judiciary as long as we did our homework and adopted legislation according to the best European and international standards? And I think this is the key question that at least I have been asking myself for the past 5 or 10 years. And by me, the answer to this question is on the table. We have tried to build an architecture which works well in established democracies. Unfortunately, this architecture, in our case, was not accompanied by sufficient accountability mechanisms. They are on paper, but in practice, when these mechanisms are to be applied by peers, we end up in the situation when one hand washes the other. And therefore, we should look for more or less standard solutions, tailored to the very specific context of each of these countries, and to identify those best practices and also avoid the lessons learned and mistakes that other countries have passed through. In our case, I think the only viable and sustainable solution to resetting the justice system is the extraordinary evaluation of judges and prosecutors. We, of course, might think of solutions that could seem simpler. For example, resetting the composition or revising how the self-administration bodies in the judiciary are composed, selecting new members to the Supreme Council of Magistracy or the Supreme Council of Prosecutors. But unfortunately, I think that for them, even with very fresh new people, it will be very difficult to do the job by themselves, internally, because corruption is so deeply rooted in Moldovan judiciary. It just spread throughout it. We have witnessed in the past several years in Moldova how about $40 billion were washed, laundered through decisions of judges from Russia towards the West. We have seen a banking fraud worth $1 billion. Nobody has been sanctioned so far. We pay tens of millions of euros for decisions of judges whereby we lose cases before the European Court of Human Rights. This situation has to end. There is no time to be wasted. And therefore, I think a combination of solutions, at least for Moldova, such as the extraordinary evaluation of judges and prosecutors, combined with the reshaping of the self-administration bodies, will provide for a viable and sustainable solution, which will first clean and then maintain the results of this exercise.
Thank you very much. I cannot agree with you more on this. Vetting of judges and cleaning the judiciary, in fact, is one of the goals of judicial reform in Ukraine too. The most important here is to ensure that the people who will be in charge of this vetting process are independent and unbiased, because we cannot entrust corrupt judiciary to vet themselves. Otherwise, the reform will be doomed. So we have with us today Ms. Hanna Suchocka, and I now want to give the floor to her. So, Ms. Suchocka, as I already mentioned, unfortunately, in transitional democracies, judiciaries are actually governed by judicial clans, which are using the principle of independence of judiciary as a shield against any reasonable attempts aimed at ensuring integrity and accountability. So the question is it true? Is it true that the principle of independence of judiciary defends corrupt judges from vetting and cleaning? What is your response to this challenge?
Thank you so much. And I am very happy to be here, and I am happy that we found finally the connection, because I was a little in a panic that we will not be able to connect. And I am just talking after a speech given by President Gianni Buchicchio. And I will follow, of course, the same line. Because, you know, I remember very well the reform we started in Poland just in 1989. I would like to remember that for us, it was exactly one of the most urgent issues to reform the judiciary. And the first reform to the judiciary was done in the 1989 in April, and then in December, when we introduced to our system the High Council of Judiciary. Because, you know, having such a heavy experience with political judges in the communist era, we were of the opinion that first of all, we exactly have to create guarantees for appointing judges, for having a much more clear system of appointment of judges, of judiciary. So for that reason, answering your question, I would like to say that the problem of appointment of judges is a crucial one. We decided to have a High Council of Judiciary strong discussion because we had no experience among the transitional democracies who decided to introduce High Council of Judiciary. We had a very good model abroad, German model, where the Minister of Justice is much more involved in the appointment of judges. And it was also our tradition. But then in the communist era, when the executive power had the power to appoint judges, we, grew up in this negative experience. So for that reason, we looked for much more neutral, I can say, solution. But since the beginning, as you said, we were of the opinion that the body should be a pluralistic body, not only composed of judges. But then we were of the opinion that the judiciary, judges should be in a majority in this body. Because it was the first step to guarantee the independence. But then the High Council of Judiciary, step by step, tried to, became a kind of new Ministry of Justice, became much more so bureaucratic and also trying to organize everything for itself. And it was the first sign that we have to create such a body as a even much more pluralistic, but not a political one. And for that reason, I think that it would be exactly maybe worthwhile for the future to invite much more independent professional person from barrister, from bar association, from advocate maybe, to be part of High Judicial Council, but not from politics. And now in Poland, we have a new law on High Judicial Council where the majority of judges are elected by parliament. It is not the just direction, yes, because judges elected by parliament, I can say, can represent two negative aspects, politicization and then corporatism. So it is exactly completely bad solution. But trying to convince what should be done, I think that High Judicial Council is exactly important body to be body for keeping independent and for playing an important role in the appointment of judges. But taking this into account, the High Judicial Council should be also, autonomous body and composed of integrity person. So it is a first step to have such a body, yes, because otherwise, when the body is representing only such a corporative thinking, it is a clear way, or maybe it's a very easy way to corruption. And then saying this, I think that exactly what should be done. Also, the discussed here in your opinion, in our opinion, and in your law, the asset declaration. Because I said that we have the reform. We started just our reform in 1989, and then we introduced asset declaration also for judges. I remember that when I was a Minister of Justice, I received the asset declaration from judges. And they were obliged exactly to declare money, property, all the things. So it was the first step to make the whole judiciary, to clean the judiciary, yes, and the fighting against corruption. And for that reason, I can say that in Poland, we don't have so many cases, and the corruption in judiciary is not such a high problem. The problem is much more now the politicization of judges, the way open to politicization, because judges are not yet politicized, because we exactly introduced this system since the beginning. But the problem of politicization still exists. But I think that is much less the problem of corruption. So I will stop here, because I've think that we'll discuss the problem later on, but I would like to support the idea of making asset declaration, because it is one of the important steps to fight against corruption.
Thank you very much. So our important conclusion now is that judiciary should be governed independently, and it actually should be independent from any undue influences from legislative or executive, but it also should be independent from politicians, oligarchs, as well as different groups of interest within judiciary, which is the case of Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Now it looks like that judges in our countries and across Europe built a fortress from different standards of the Council of Europe, other European organizations, and these recommendations and standards serve as a wall. They are shielding against society and society's wills to ensure accountability of judiciary. So we have Dr. Tilman Hoppe, expert from Germany, with us. Mr. Hoppe, what are your thoughts on the issue? What should we do to ensure judiciary is both independent and accountable?
Thank you very much, Halyna, and let me thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's a great pleasure to be here with all the various team co-experts here. Yeah, I can only follow what the previous speakers have been saying, or building on that, that we face a dilemma here. On the one hand, rule of law and the European standards, they tell us we need independence and we should not politicize the judiciary. We need personal independence. We need institutional independence. And then on the other hand, we have judges, we have people that take this as a personal privilege. And as you say, they wall themselves into a fortress and they abuse these European standards. They say, oh, you want to introduce asset declarations, like Hanna Suchocka was saying. And they say, no, it's violating judicial independence. And then they cut away all the meaningful parts of the reform until a facade, a puppet of an asset declaration system remains. And of course, they do this as part of a larger corporate network or corporatism network, because the politicians also like it when the judges cut away these parts from the asset declaration reforms. So it's not only the judiciary, it's actually a larger power caste or elite network they're serving. And this is a dilemma. And what can the Venice Commission do? For example, the Venice Commission, I mean, they cannot write in the opinion, you have the wrong people in the judiciary, or a large part of them, it's just the wrong people, please get rid of them. I mean, the Venice Commission cannot write that. They can only judge or assess the framework, and they can assess the tools that are being proposed. And in a way, I think what I've observed over the past 10 or 11 years, especially in the Eastern Partnership region, is also a learning process, I think, for everybody involved. And that is, you cannot fight corruption in a country like Ukraine or other countries you mentioned, the same way you do it in Denmark or Sweden or France. It's the same standards, but there's different social needs that justify different measures. So it's the same thinking, but actually you have to apply tools like that were spoken about already, vetting of judges or prosecutors. It would be unthinkable in the UK to say next year we are vetting all judges because we don't trust them anymore. It would be outrageous. And in Albania, it was supported by the entire international community, and it was treated as something obvious and necessary, and the European Court of Human Rights even approved it. And in my view, it's the only light of hope I have right now in terms of like how to move forward, because we break the dilemma. We get outside stakeholders who have no political interest, who are not part of the domestic networks, and who break this corporatism, as previous speakers were saying. And we see in practice that the public and the larger community, they trust these processes and they are being perceived as displaying integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppe. So we've been talking a lot on about our judicial governance bodies, judicial councils, and we clearly see that unfortunately they are not independent because they are governed by judicial clans. And talking about the experience of Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, countries that attempt democratic transformation, it becomes obvious that solutions that work for well-established democracies, solutions that envision establishment of independent judicial councils governed by judiciary, these solutions at the same time do not work for transition democracies, because when we grant judiciary, corrupt judiciary, sole control over reforming itself, at the end of the day, we see that reform failed. This is something Ukraine did in 2016. So, and I want to give the floor to prominent expert from Romania, Ms. Laura Stefan. Laura, do you agree to the conclusion that transitional democracies need new solutions to tackle judicial corruption and ensure judiciaries are truly independent?
Well, I think for many years we have fought this dilemma of the chicken and the egg. You know, what comes first, reforming the judiciary or giving judges enough guarantees that they feel safe to actually go ahead and do their job. And as any dilemma, this is a complicated thing, and trying to use simple solution, because our brain is wired in a way that we search for simple solution, and we truly believe that simple solutions can exist in our daily life for complicated situations. I think we learned in the last 20 years that complicated problems usually have complicated solutions, and that one-size-fits-all type of solutions do not work, that you cannot apply the same standards that countries that have had democracies and robust judiciaries for tens or hundreds of years. You cannot apply the same standards to countries that have just come out of communism or are transitioning to rule of law and fully fledged democracy. Why is that? Simple. You know, you have to adjust your solutions to the problems you have in a country. When your judiciary is completely inward-looking, not to say corrupt, but let's limit ourselves to thinking that the judiciaries are just protecting their own rights and privileges. When you have people that have connections, because they grew up together and they developed professionally with the help of important politicians or oligarchs, then it becomes ridiculous to assume that they will ever be able to tackle complicated problems in the society, be it high-level corruption or organized crime, as it was the case in Albania. Yeah. So to me, it is obvious that we need to come up with solutions that actually reflect our current challenges. And pretending that we don't see the challenges is not going to help, really. I think if we take a step back, the question is really, is judicial policies really a kitchen table discussion that should happen only with people in the judiciaries? Because that's the argument. Nobody knows better than we do. Yeah, but is it just for you to have a say when it comes to judicial policies? Or is this something that the entire society has to discuss? I remember having a conversation some years ago, maybe 4 years ago, when an attempt to change the pension system in Romania for judges. Just to give you a hint, here they retire when they have 25 years of judicial experience, yeah? So around 50. And they wanted to retire when they have only 20 years of seniority, yeah? So around 45. And I said, this is outrageous. We were discussing with Venice Commission experts. And they say, I wonder why you say that, because everybody seems to like this provision. I said, of course. I mean, of course they like it, because it's good for them. Wouldn't you want to retire when you're 45? I know I would, yeah? So why do we only discuss with the judiciary? Should we have other people around the table? Should we maybe have civil society? Should we have barristers? Should we have people that have an interest in the judiciary beyond the legal profession? And, you know, I think the answer is yes. But I think then we are faced with the next challenge, and that is how to ensure that these people are not proxies for oligarchs and politicians, because let's face it, this is the next threat. Yeah, so we open the door, we bring in new people, hoping that they bring integrity, transparency to the process, new standards, new ways of working. But what if they become proxies for exactly those that we wanted to keep out of the judiciary? And I think this is a fair concern that I hear from colleagues in the judiciary. You know, once you open this door, let's again look at our countries. I mean, populism is flourishing. Oligarchs are super powerful. They buy TV stations, they buy newspapers, they buy people. Why wouldn't they buy an expert that would be part of these new systems? So I think we need already to craft in our mind an answer to that question, because it will come, and it is a relevant question. And one last comment about, you know, our dream that good laws that match Western standards would transform societies. Yeah, and our big disappointment that, you know, it also takes people. It takes people because in many of our countries, these laws were a mere window dressing exercise. What I mean is not that we didn't adopt them and we didn't implement them, but we didn't believe in them. For us, they were there just to check a box, and maybe deep inside, we were all hoping that we'll prove that these standards don't belong here. Yeah. So this is, I think, a growing up experience where you develop a deeper understanding and you internalize these standards. You understand why they're there. It's almost like a kid. When you tell them, don't do that, because that's the rule. And they say, but I don't care. Why should I follow the rule? But then when you explain why the rule is there, that the rule is actually there to help you, I think then the click happens. And, you know, sooner or later, they will also internalize the rule. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have, of course, we have to adjust solutions to the problems we have in our countries. And before we move to the most, at least in my mind, the most interesting part of our discussion on the solutions to judicial reforms in transitional democracies, I want to present a remarkable intervention we have today. We have a pre-recorded speech of Wendy Morton, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, Minister for European Neighbourhood and the Americas, United Kingdom, Wendy Morton.
Hello and Dobry den. The UK is honoured to be one of Ukraine's strongest partners and allies, and I'm honoured to speak to you today. We are steadfast in our support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russian aggression, and we are strengthening that alliance after signing our strategic partnership agreement late last year. So it won't surprise you that we view judicial reform in Ukraine as essential, both for the country's development and its resilience to Russian aggression. Ukraine has made strong progress in reform since 2014. But as a close and honest friend of Ukraine, I can say that while reform is a good defence, a self-interested and corrupt minority is preventing the country from using it effectively. That minority wants to consolidate its grip on power, and an unreformed judiciary remains their best tool for maintaining their stronghold. The UK, both bilaterally and with our G7 partners, has for a long time advocated a systematic approach to judicial reform as a central pillar of the fight against corruption. We are confident that it is the key to unlocking Ukraine's full, amazing potential. We have talked about de-oligarchization for some time. As President Zelensky has said, we all know the names of these people, but that can't be achieved without comprehensive judicial reform. We understand that the entrenched problems in Ukraine's judiciary, its links with vested interests, present enormous challenges. Challenges that need pragmatic, creative solutions that balance cleansing with constitutionality. Some of Ukraine's successful reforms, like the establishment of the High Anti-Corruption Court and the reboot of the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption, show that core European values, such as judicial independence, can and should prevail. It's for Ukraine to decide its own route there, but we have drawn some key lessons from others' successes in the region. There are three things that we know are effective. First, a comprehensive strategy backed with political will. Quick fixes just don't work, and we want Ukraine's success to be for the long term. Second, consultation. The best judicial reforms use the expertise of civil society and legal practitioners who recognise the need for change and the best order for reforms. And third, a willingness to take bold steps. International case law increasingly shows the need for radical measures to disrupt a status quo of corruption. In Ukraine's case, this likely means using external input on concerns over judges' integrity. It's vital that the Ukrainian government maintains its commitment and momentum, and I am confident it will. Its friends in the international community should be equally committed to supporting it. Events like this are so helpful for facilitating that support and helping the government give the Ukrainian people the security, stability and prosperity they want and deserve. Ukraine can rest assured that the UK will be by its side on that journey. And I wish you a really fruitful discussion at the conference. And I hope that next time we can meet in person. Thank you.
So thanks to Ms. Morton. And again, I want to stress that judicial reform is a key to unlocking amazing potential of countries in the region, and particularly, I mean, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, and Armenia. So we've been talking a lot of problems we have with judicial governance in transitional democracies. We've been talking a lot about corruption. We've been talking a lot about lack of independence of judiciary and individual judges. So what the solution could be to these threats, how to ensure our judiciaries are independent and accountable at the same time. So a month ago, experts from Armenia, Bulgaria, Romania, Georgia, Moldova, Romania and Ukraine got together to search for solutions. And we came up with the recommendations towards ensuring accountable and independent judiciaries in our countries. And we want to present these recommendations today at our panel, because one of the goals of our conference is not only to pay attention to corruption, lawfare, other threats to democracy, but also to discuss and suggest solutions that that might work not only for Ukraine, not only for countries in the region, but also for the whole world. So what is our response to the problems of judicial corruption? We prepared eight recommendations towards ensuring independent and accountable judiciaries. First of all, it is important to stress that powers of judges should be counterbalanced with their duties. And as Laura Stefan already stressed today, when we decide on specific model of judicial governance, we should take into consideration the history of judicial administration and judicial culture. We should take into account specific situations we have in transitional democracies. Next, judiciary should be governed by independent authority. It is crucially important that people who decide who should be appointed to judicial positions and who should be dismissed, it is crucially important that these people are independent and unbiased, that they are free from undue influence of the parliament, of the government, of the president, and also of politicians and oligarchs. This independent judiciary, therefore, should be composed of independent members who meet the requirements of professionalism and integrity criteria. This does not mean that judges cannot become members of judicial councils. Of course, they are welcomed, but judges, as any other candidates, should meet the requirements and they should undergo a scrutiny of their integrity. They should not have some exclusive rights or quotas for membership, because it is what they are using now to preserve the status quo and to preserve their influence over the whole judiciaries. The next important recommendation is that, of course, the independence and transparency of the Council for Judiciary should be ensured by the way its members are selected. Therefore, they should undergo a public, transparent, and fair selection procedure. And to safeguard the selection procedure, it is important it is set up by law. National system may provide for different models for appointing members of judicial councils. Like in Ukraine, we have parliament, president engaged in this process. Some countries involve Ministry of Justice. The majority of of members of judicial councils in our countries are now appointed by judiciary itself. But it is crucially important that in any case, an independent panel should be in charge of the assessment of all the candidates who would like to become members of judicial councils. It is crucially important that this independent panel ensure that candidates who meet professionalism and integrity criteria are appointed. The panel assessing integrity of the candidates applying for positions in judicial councils should be composed of independent, unbiased experts possessing outstanding professional and personal qualities and having impeccable reputation and trust of the society. And aiming at fostering public trust in the process, national system should encourage the involvement of civil society and international experts, in particularly well-reputable civil society organizations with recognized experience in rule of law, human rights, and anti-corruption should be eligible to nominate experts to the independent panel. The involvement of international experts successfully worked for the establishment of the High Anti-Corruption Court of Ukraine. Now we are trying to multiply this experience to the selection of members of judicial councils, and I'm truly convinced that this will also successfully work for the countries in the region. Last but not least, it is important to ensure members of judicial councils are accountable, so they should not be exempted from general anti-corruption requirements and measures. And where possible, they should comply with higher integrity standards and professional ethics criteria given the importance of their role. And last but not least, in case of misconduct a member of the Council for Judiciary, an effective disciplinary procedure should be in place. Principles of independence and accountability should be equally respected when relevant disciplinary procedures are conducted. So we believe that the implementation of this recommendation in our countries will help us to make judicial reforms a success story this time. And now I want to discuss it with our experts, and first of all with Ms. Stamate. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the implementation of these recommendations might work and Moldova could benefit from the implementation of these ideas?
Actually, I think these ideas are a good concept from which we can derive more specific, tailored scenarios for each specific context. So as an overall concept, the recommendations are setting a way or paving a way towards a more inclusive, a more transparent judicial council, which is very important. I have to admit that I fully agree with what Laura Stefan said earlier, that if we include, or let's say diversify the membership of the Judicial Council to include independent experts from civil society, representatives of the Bar Association, the key element here is how to select them. Because in Moldova, we have had, in the past several years, competitions or selection processes that unfortunately have been flawed, that have failed. There were the best interests to select the best people through those processes, but for one reason or another, these have in many cases failed. So indeed, not to give, so we should be very careful not to give this power and authority to external actors from outside the judiciary to, let's say, administer the judiciary in a judicial council, to give it to those who are not qualified. And I'm not only saying about their professionalism, I'm actually more referring to their integrity and uncorruptibility. And in this respect, I think as a transitional measure, the involvement of international experts would be highly valuable. How to do that is another question. So we have to think how we can shape this mechanism or this exercise in a way so that it corresponds to the needs of the country and also to the international framework, international, let's say, best recommendations in this area. But I think a combination of these factors should be considered so as to ensure maximum success of this idea. Thank you.
I completely agree, and now I want to ask Ms. Suchocka what are her thoughts on the recommendations presented. And I would say that Venice Commission goes far beyond the recommendations envisioned by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe initially in 1994 and then in 2010. Venice Commission, when assessing draft laws of Albania and Ukraine, suggests very revolutionary ideas, conclusions and solutions. And basically, I can say that here in our recommendations, we do not suggest something new. It is something Venice Commission has already commented on. So can we state that Venice Commission opinions on Ukraine, on Albania, are setting up precedents for the countries in the region, for transitional democracies who want to fight judicial corruption? Ms. Suchocka, are you with us?
I was disconnected, and so for that reason I lost connection. I haven't heard your question, the final. I started the beginning, but I haven't heard your question.
It's all right. Of course, I will repeat it. Though, the idea is that it seems to me that the Venice Commission, in its recent opinions on judicial reforms of Albania and in Ukraine, goes far beyond the recommendations set up by the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe in 1994 and then in 2010. Venice Commission, in its recent opinions, has made, I would say, revolutionary conclusions. It suggested ideas, and basically these recommendations we just presented, they do not suggest anything new, because it is something Venice Commission already already envisioned in its opinion. So in this regard, can we conclude that Venice Commission opinions are setting up precedents for judicial reforms in transitional democracies?
You know, I try to answer your question, but I was exactly not fully connected with you. What should I say? Our opinion of the Venice Commission, as it has been explained by President Bukikio, is built and on the how to say line of the guiding lines of the Venice Commission opinions, prepared in the term of 30 years. You have to take into account that exactly one of our main roles of the Venice Commission was making opinion to the reform on judiciary. We were involved in many countries on different stages of making the reform. And here, only maybe one short comment, because I am of the opinion that it's sometimes difficult to call the amendments making to the law as a real reform, because very often there are only small amendments which are put to the existing system, and then finally they are not fully coherent with other solutions. We could observe it in the case of Ukraine, when such partial amendments were included to the law and even then to the constitution, but then they were not, as President Bukikio said, there was no such a holistic reform. And I think that we also have to change maybe on the country observing the situation. You said now that the Venice Commission is going far beyond the opinion of the Council Minister from 1994. 1994, probably it was a different situation. We didn't expect it, that the, how to say, corruption would be so high, because in the beginning, we thought only on the politicization, as I said, depolitization of the judiciary. And we thought in the Council of Europe, in the Venice Commission, that when we introduce some mechanism, then we guaranteed the depolitization of the judges, but that also impartiality. And it would be automatical way to and of course it opened way to the corruption. This situation was a clear sign that now we have to look for a new method, new solutions for guaranteeing the independence of a judiciary, and especially to create impartiality of judiciary. It is one of the most difficult problems. For that reason, I see the recommendations proposed by you as being in line with recommendations of the Venice Commission. And not only the recommendations, which are now the detailed recommendation concerning the Ukrainian law, but your recommendations are exactly put in the framework of the Venice Commission report on the appointment of judiciary, of judges. You remember that it was one of the first general report of the Venice Commission on appointment of judges. So we found that the system of appointment is so crucial and important for creating an impartiality and independence of judiciary that the first report was devoted only to this issue. It was done in cooperation with the Council of Europe and Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe. And then the next report was a report on the independence of judiciary and guarantees of independence of judiciary. And then in the report of the Venice Commission on the independence of judiciary, you can find also some sentences and proposals which are totally in line what is now included into your recommendations, yes? Because, for example, there is also such a clearly said that we have to guarantee the universal standards, or maybe better use the word European standards, because we are discussing on the countries that are members of the Council of Europe. So we have to guarantee the European standards of independence of judiciary. But the way, as we discuss here, leading to this guarantee to the final effect could be different. And how to say, solutions in different countries could be different, but finally there should always be, how to say, kept on the track. Because then otherwise we can go completely to different direction and to create again the political judiciary. So for that reason, and now we can see, and it was also a very symptomatic evolution of the opinion of the Venice Commission concerning the role of High Judicial Council. Because in the beginning, the Venice Commission was not so strong in favor of creation the High Judicial Council, because gave examples, as I said before, that there are countries where High Judicial Council does not exist, but the independence of judiciary and the just appointment of judges is guaranteed. But then after Venice Commission changed its mind, it was also after opinion done for Albania and other countries that probably in transitional democracy, the best way is to create High Judicial Council. But High Judicial Council should be autonomous body, as I said. And first, we thought that this autonomous body means that it should be composed a majority of judges. Now, we see, after the evolutions going on, that, as he said, probably in this body should be also participation of other persons. Now, depends who. We can agree here that probably not politicians. Politicians should not be represented in such a body, or maybe only, as it is in some countries, 1 member, 2 members of parliament, and minister of justice. Question of was the discussion between political minister of justice and independent, not European standard, but the European standard is that the body should guarantee the, how to say, just way of appointment of judges, prepared the good procedure, and to finally to create a group of integrity persons that are working for judiciary. In this sense, I am also of the opinion that the role of international experts in countries being in transition is of great importance. They should take part in the work because they have a different experience. And I can say that the countries where the international experts were involved showed that it was, in many cases, a success. You also in Ukraine, you have the Anticorruption Court, yes, which is one of the most successful stories in Ukraine, but because it was based on the cooperation with international expert. So this case should be taken into account, and the decision to decide on the international expert would be a decision taken by sovereign state. But exactly, I think that it would be very, very useful. So I support the recommendation presented by you because they are in line with the Venice Commission, but in details, they should be adapted to the situation existing in concrete countries, not breaking the general European standards.
Of course, definitely we do not want to replace existing standard with our recommendation. Our aim is to introduce some alternative solution for countries in transition, and of course we aim to build judiciaries independent enough to govern themselves. So this is our overall goal. We would like to get there, but now we feel like that we need some more adaptive solutions, I would put it like that, and I completely agree with you on the fact that politicians should not be involved, they should not be members of judicial councils, and they should not be involved in the process of the election of members of judicial councils. International experts. Mr. Hoppe, what are your thoughts in this regard? What do you think of the idea of involving international experts in selection of judicial governance bodies in judicial governance reform? And importantly, do you support the idea that they should have temporary but decisive role in this process?
Thank you very much. As I was listening to you reading the draft recommendations, I was thinking, what would a Ukrainian member or president of a judicial self-governance body think about these recommendations? And when I look at them, I think they would probably nod to almost all of the recommendations. They would say, of course we should have integrity and accountability. Of course we should be disciplinarily accountable. Of course there should be integrity criteria for our appointment. And this is what we did. We submitted our asset declarations, and we never committed a crime, or at least you could not prove it. And we know this whole violin of, how shall I say, let's say pass by a low bar of standards. And I think they might even appease or compromise to the idea that civil society members or non-judicial members are part of the council, as long as they are not majority. And I'm sure the Venice Commission and the European Court of Human Rights or whoever, they will never give up the idea that there should be a majority of judges. And so and for a good reason. And so they will feel pretty safe. And as Laura was saying, the civil society members can easily be proxies, or if you go to other countries, for example, Azerbaijan, you have meaningful civil society organizations there, but you also have a state sector civil society there. So I think the only thing that would hurt or make them like feel uneasy, the litmus test is the involvement of international experts, actually. Because they're proposed from outside the system, they come from outside the system, they are often even financed from outside the system, but that is not even the point in the end, I think. And that is a real game changer. The networks will not work anymore. The playing down of integrity standards. Yeah, because when I look in the recommendations, it says they should pass integrity criteria, but then the difference is in practice. Like how do you define integrity, and how high do you set the threshold, and do you actually how shall I say let it suffice that there is substantial doubts about a candidate, and so that candidate will not pass. All these little technical questions, I think in the end will only be a success if the people selecting the council members are independent. And in this, again, I agree with Laura. It's not a simple solution and it's not the silver bullet, but it's my light of hope, as I said earlier. And what we saw in Ukraine, I think, is very promising and in the perception of many different stakeholders. And to me, I have a very simple litmus test if an anti-corruption tool is effective or not. If the ones who are affected don't like it and are very silent about it or start to create ugly narratives about it, it violates the sovereignty and other myths, then I know I'm on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Stefan, what do you think of involvement of international experts? And importantly, do you think that this might work for the countries in the region for transitional democracies, whether we can engage international experts and give them temporary, crucial, even decisive role in the process? Would it help us? Is this the solution that can help us to achieve independent judiciaries?
It definitely is a solution, and it has been tried, and it worked. And I don't think it violates really anything. I think this is just, an argument that people opposing the reform of the judiciary are making up. I think when embarking into such an important effort, there's also a need for international organizations to understand that this takes time, commitment, and consistency of decisions. You can't expect that things are solved overnight. So this element of temporary nature of the process, I think it needs explanations. It needs to be clear for everybody involved in this thing that it's not in a blink of an eye. You're not going to build strong internal instruments overnight. And, talking from the perspective of Romania, I can tell you that, there was a lot of reform between 2004 and 2007 in the area of the judiciary. And we kept getting this question from the European Commission: is the reform irreversible? Is the reform irreversible? How can it be? How can it be irreversible? Of course it's reversible. Of course it takes more than 3 years to actually cement changes in not only in the mindset, in the institutional setup, in the way people think about issues. I mean, if you look at Romania 15 years ago and you look at Romania today, I think integrity dilemmas are completely different in the judiciary, right? So it takes time. And I think international experts have a very good input in terms of their background, the way they see things, because they've seen it in other contexts, but they also need the help of nationals. And I think that is that's the Achilles point, so to say. Who's going to advise the internationals? Because you need to know who's who in a country. You need to have that national knowledge and insight that only someone that has lived through these times has. I mean, I don't know, I think we have the same prototype of people that are on the wrong side from our perspective, yeah. So they're not supporting reforms of the judiciary. They think that the status quo is very good. But at the same time, professionally, they're not good, they're not bad, they're not stupid, they're well-trained, they're well-networked. So they would present themselves very nice in an interview, right? There I have hopes for the declarations of assets and interests, really, because I think that's where you see who's who also. So it goes without saying that I'm supporting these ideas that you put forward. I was part of the group that thought about them and talked about them. I think they're in line with what we see in the standards of the Council of Europe and the Venice Commission. But I think it is important to look at the details. Yeah, just don't think that, as we thought about the laws, that they will change everything. Don't think that a commission of internationals is going to change everything if it's not attended for by people with high skills and good knowledge of the local context. Yeah. And you know, we know that when countries start anti-corruption campaigns, there's a lot of misleading information in the public about, you know, who's good and who's bad. Sometimes judges are criticized for decisions. And then when you look at those decisions, you see that they merely exercise judicial oversight in good faith. But maybe the evidence was not compelling. Maybe the evidence was not legally gathered and so on. So I think, yes, absolutely having international experience is a plus, but we have to put in the other ingredients in the soup. Just the chicken won't do. We need carrots, we need onions, we need everything to get the end result.
Dear Laura, thank you for your contribution. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. It feels like we just started, but now we came to the closing remarks. So I invite our speakers to make some closing remarks. Ms. Stamate.
Thank you. Just if we think of what is the key element that is missing currently and I think it's the same for all the countries in the region that we are speaking about, but I can definitely tell you about Moldova. What is the key element that is missing in the Moldovan judiciary is accountability. And I think that from this very word, accountability, all the other, and I don't like to use the word reform because it has been compromised so much, all the other renewal, resetting mechanism should come from this accountability vision. So this should be set as a crossing, as a red line throughout the process. And when we design how we reshape the system so that we reach this accountability, I think things will become more clear, because accountability will be also the word which will accompany the reshaping system. When you select the international experts, when they select the members of the national, of the High Judicial Council, etc., it's all around the same accountability. And I really hope that we will be able to say in a few words, in a few years, not very far from now, that we finally have a judiciary which is not just independent, but is also accountable towards citizens and accountable to the law.
Let's make it happen. Ms. Suchocka, if you are with us and would like to give some closing remarks, so you're welcome. I guess there are some troubles with connection, so if we can listen now to Dr. Tilman Hoppe.
Yes, thank you. I think I would repeat again what I...
Yes, yes.
I can hear you.
Yes, we do hear you too, so...
Yes, okay. So I am the two sentences. So I also would like to say what I said at the beginning, that the problem of appointment is a crucial one, because we have also to take into account that now the many cases are judged by the European Court of Human Rights and also by the European Tribunal, but taking into account the process of appointment of judges. And so we have a judgment where is exactly the mode of appointing of judges that not guarantee the right to fair justice. So for that reason, I think what has been said here, that we have to find in different countries in transition the best way for appointment of judges, also with the participation of international experts, so far as it is possible, and it will create a better guarantee for creating a judiciary composed of integrity person, exactly. And in this case, also integrity means that the person will be accountable, yes, because it is strictly connected, the two things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Hoppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just want to echo what Laura Stefan was saying, that indeed international experts cannot work just isolated or in an isolated manner, but as we saw in Ukraine, it was really going hand in glove with civil society, like you were seeing, for example, for the selection commission of the High Anti-Corruption Court, where the International Council and the Civil Society Council worked hand in glove, or on the NACP selection commission, non-judicial, but still where you had half-half international experts and civil society experts. And it was a wonderful experience, and it worked really well. So yeah, just to underline this point, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And Ms. Laura Stefan, welcome.
Thank you. So yes, I think you are proposing a good way forward. I think we have to thank you for getting all of us together to reflect about these issues. I think in the future, as we move along these lines, we have to also take into consideration mechanism to safeguard the fact that this process is not hijacked by oligarchs, by criminals, by organized crime groups, because they would probably be preparing their own experts. You know, I mean, the angle of gongos should not be underestimated. And, you know, I mean, it was, Antak, I think, gave a great example of how this can work with a very involved civil society in Ukraine. And I think we have a lot to learn from that experiment. And I do hope that the transfer of expertise also happens through this international plus national cooperation mechanism, because that's the end result, that countries do stand on their own feet and that judicial integrity is actually achieved at the end of the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. So, dear speakers, thank you very much for joining our discussion today. Thank you very much for joining Democracy in Action Conference. We presented a solution today. We already know what should we do and how can we tackle judicial corruption, how can we combat judicial corruption, and how can we ensure our judiciaries are independent and at the same time are accountable. As Ms. Suchocka said, now we have to ensure our recommendations are implemented in the recommendations of the Council of Europe. So let's do our best to make this happen. Thank you very much for watching us today, and there will be a lot of fruitful discussions today, so please stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, thank you.